You know, if we would have just put a glass case around that candle, that would have been a really cool prop. That would have safely burned.
Probably. It probably would have been safer had we done that. But we didn't do that. We're also live.
Hi! Yeah, I guess we can talk about that.
Wait, what is it? Eyebrows up?
A lot of time. Eyebrows up and apart to show that you're not a threat and you are willing to communicate.
This is creepy as hell.
Well, it's because you're doing it weirdly.
Try it. That's pretty good. You actually can smile.
Yeah.
I once could smile. Okay. Yeah. You might notice down this way is the Kickstarter page. You should get on that. Okay, anyway. This is Ulfithin, right? You want to talk about this weekend?
Yeah. So we just spent, we just spent all weekend at the Kentucky Highland Renaissance Festival.
It was
That was the worst huzzah ever. We're going to pretend that didn't happen.
Huzzah!
That's better.
There we go.
Yeah. We've got some friends in a Viking entertainment group. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. And they did some really awesome performances this weekend, so we went out to support them. And then also I am a vendor out there, so.
She vended.
I vended so hard. It was very busy. And we also did some promotional stuff for Dreadlore, which is why neither one of us is wearing the Dreadlore shirt, because they're soaked with the tears of children. And
awesome.
And awesome.
I am holding one of the Dreadlore shirts.
A clean one.
A clean one. This is the shirt.
This is the official shirt. We will be having a special edition shirt to show you very soon.
You might notice that this one says Julia on it because I'm holding this shirt hostage until I give this to the person who bought it. Yeah. I have this one and Jenna's. So if you guys are on the stream ever, I have your shirts.
He does plan on giving them to you someday.
Someday. Until then, I shall use them for my own promotional purposes. Right. Anyway, if you would like one of these shirts, go to the Kickstarter because you can get one there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So while we were having our morning coffee today, it was actually the morning too.
It was morning when we started this.
While we were having our morning coffee, we started talking about the game that I'm going to run tonight. Actually, it'll be a Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition game.
Most
they
likely.
need to know 5.
5.
5th edition.
5th.
And I like to add different things because, you know, D&D is cool, it's a mainstay and all that stuff. And D20 is obviously used all over the place in terms of a game system. It's the most popular game system, right? But, in my humble opinion, some games can be made better with some different rules. And I can go into that, but I'm not gonna go into why I think that.
Nice catch. Yeah. The campaign that we are currently in,
Richmond Fay.
Richmond Fay, I would consider it a homebrew, but I also am not 100% knowledgeable about the usage of the word. It is D&D 5th ed, but we also employ a lot of other side rules, I guess, in order to make it more exciting.
House rules versus homebrew. So homebrew is a system that you've created at home. You probably used, a base mechanic like D20 or D10 or whatever, and you kind of created your own game. We did that with Dreadlore, and then made it an actual game. House rules is what you're talking about.
House rules. Okay, so that's what we're. So that's for this campaign. We've got a lot of house rules that make it not less mechanically driven, but I think just a little bit more flowy in terms of the actions we want to take and the playing the characters that we've created. It's a lot more like the rogue is generally not going to fail at sneaking rogue stuff. You know, the warrior's not going to fail at the warrior stuff. Generally speaking, with how we've swung it, but that's not the point of this live stream.
See, it's so easy to diverge. It
is, especially when you're recovering from fair and you're tired.
Right. Fair does. The sun doth beat down upon you.
It hurts.
So the idea is a little bit of game system theory really fast. Not game theory, game system theory. The rules, and this is contentious, this statement I'm about to say. A lot of people will probably disagree with it. But they don't know what they're talking.
He's very humble.
I am. I'm very humble.
Yes.
The rules, in my opinion, of a game teach players how to play. Because the idea is, I know that statement seems pretty obvious, but it's the idea of like, let me see if a good idea. Okay, so like in Monopoly, for example, just a straight up old school tabletop game, right? Obviously it's not a tabletop RPG, but it's a tabletop game. You have rules to play the game. And in those rules, if you do certain things, you get rewarded, right? For example, if you pass go, you get like the money, or you get a certain amount of money. If you land on free parking, you can wheel and deal. And it doesn't take very long before, you know, the 10-year-old or the 30-year-old or whatever, the 60-year-old playing says, I can make deals, and if I make deals that benefit me and kind of screw over the other person, that's the best way to play this game. Or, at the very last moment, to betray them and put all my hotels on wherever, right? Mm-hmm. That's not in the rule book. But it's using the rules to play the game the best way. So, when you play Monopoly, it gets pretty cutthroat really fast. Now, you could say, oh, let's play Monopoly, but we're going to play nice. Right? You could do that. But when it comes down to it, when you play Monopoly, it gets cutthroat. Why? Because the rules enforce and reward a certain kind of play. It's the same thing with D&D or any game. The mechanics, you got to have them. But they're going to eventually enforce a certain way of playing. If, for example, you need to roll a die and you need the highest number possible, your players will try to do everything to get the highest number. It doesn't matter if it makes sense with the story. Now, the story will kind of temper their actions, right? Like the lawful good paladin, you know, if they kill this goblin, then they get like the necklace of holy Antioch or whatever, right? And that makes them more powerful so that they can do good stuff. They're going to find a way to kill that goblin. That's how the game works. Why? Well, you know, not all players are going to do that, but the game pushes them like a tide towards doing that because the system rewards it. So how do you mitigate that? Because while that's fun, you know, there's a point where you want your story to be free form, but not just, hey, number crunchy. House rules. Let's talk about them. There you go.
Rules for the house. We also like shiny in this house.
Yes.
So, really the reason why this live stream was created today was because we were drinking our morning coffee, sitting on the couch, talking about how to use these
coins
in the game. Yeah, coins. We got all these well, it's really hard to show this without my fingers being in the way. But these bad boys that we just have lying around the house is an old teaching tool from something completely different, in a way that benefits the campaign that we're playing. A lot of the players in this current game are
awesome.
Are awesome, but they're also reward motivated. Rewards in the physical sense as well. Like our inspiration is chocolate coins. And it works
Really well.
really, really, really well. It's a really fun reward to get. It's actually that in and of that self. Yeah, we're going with it.
That one.
We are a little cutthroat with how hard we try to get inspiration.
So let me give an example. So if you don't know, in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, there's a rule called inspiration. What it allows you to do is you get a certain amount of points, and if you spend a point, you can re-roll your die. So the big fat D20 is the most important die in the game. It decides whether you succeed or fail on something. And sometimes you roll it, you're the hulking barbarian person, and you're going to use your barbarian axe to bust down a door, right? Which is made of shaved ice. So you should be able to do this.
Right.
Because you're a barbarian from the Himalayas or whatever. Oops, you rolled a 1. Actually, that doesn't happen. You cut yourself on the ice, slip, fall, break your neck down the hill. Which, that's part of the mechanics, and that's funny and all these things. But if you're trying to play a campaign where you have built up this big idea behind that door, you just derailed everything because, ha 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 ha. So, in D&D, they're well, you have inspiration points. You spend this inspiration point, re-roll that, right? The house rule we have is, we represent getting an inspiration point by this bad boy. A piece of chocolate in the shape of gold coin, right? I saw them at CVS and I thought, this will work.
It has.
So, how do you, as a DM, as a storyteller, how do you give out inspiration? Well, you're supposed to do it, for cool stuff. For example,
one of your players telling a, within the game, very funny joke. That works in this campaign. Oh. Well. What is happening here? What's...
don't worry about it.
Yeah. Derailing me is what's happening. So if the rogue does really cool rogue stuff, especially some sort of additional narrative flair, the DM will award some inspiration.
Right.
If the funny guy is funny, it's a good D&D joke, or a really terrible good D&D joke.
Or they just do the thing that they should do.
Right, yeah. You can reward people for moving in the direction that you're trying to send them, doing what they're supposed to do, focusing, not doing outside talk, whatever you really need. Inspiration is a good tool for that.
Remembering things in game. It's been 5-6 sessions, and you're right, so you walk up on, that one NPC who you've only seen in the distance in the bog. They turn. Do you know who it is? What do they look like? And then someone oh, I've got my notes. Boom, boom. Bam, inspiration. So in my DMing persuasion, I like to give out inspiration quite often. Because I hate the idea of flipping a coin and saying, 50% you succeed, 50% you fail. That's one of the things about D20 I don't like. Hence why I like inspiration, because it gives you extra chances, and it's a resource that players can manage themselves. Some DMs are very miserly about inspiration because they want the game to be hard. In my mind, though, the game's already hard. So if the players know, if I'm clever, if I remember things, if I'm in there in the game making a fun experience, I'll get a reward. It's kind of like being come, here's your treat. And they start doing it. And they also have fun doing it because they get chocolate.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It's a really good time. And also, in not being miserly about giving out the inspiration, your players aren't scared to use it to do the stuff they're supposed to do.
Right.
Rather than taking the fail so that they can use that inspiration for the big bad evil guy. they're not afraid to use it to further the storyline, which is really nice.
Exactly. You don't want miserly players, and you don't want a miserly DM either.
Right. So that's the rundown on inspiration.
Well, so Emyris brought in all these guys.
Yeah.
A big bad bag of these coins.
Yep.
And I was like, I want to use this coin somehow. How? Well, in one of the incarnations of Dreadlore, the game that has the Kickstarter, there was this idea, and this is not in the current game. It's actually become a different game. But regardless, in one of the incarnations, we were throwing around this rule of taking one for the team. And so I've decided to use that in D&D in our house rules. All right. So, a narrative point. That's what these things are. Basically, at the beginning of the game, all the players have a certain amount of these. Kind of like in poker or something. So you get like probably 4 or 5. And these are narrative points. What do narrative points do?
So, narrative points allow the player to hold a bit of sway over the story. So, for example...
This is actually in Dreadlore, by the way. But, sorry.
It is. It's called a different thing in Dreadlore.
Pips in Dreadlore.
And while they do function the same, the version of Dreadlore that he was referring to, with which we used the narrative points, had a different mechanic behind it. It's really fun,
Yeah.
but it's a different functioning of that. So anyway, narrative points allow the player to help sway the story in the direction that they've decided to take it.
It allows them to cheat.
Yes, it does. But you can't say that to certain character types because they'll take it and run with it, and then it's not fun for anybody.
Like, wait, I can cheat? It's
Right.
like, no, you can't cheat. You can just direct the story.
Right. It's
Give an example.
Yeah. So, let's say that you are up in a tree and you need to sleep.
You know.
Like you do.
It happens.
It does. And you don't want to fall out of said tree. You want to tie a rope around yourself, strap yourself in for a night of very comfortable sleep on a
tree.
On a tree branch. You don't want to fall off. You wrap yourself with this rope. Well, you forgot that in the last encounter, that you used your rope to trip up the big bad evil guy. Never said you picked it up.
But your DM remembers.
Because they will. You can spend a narrative point to say, well, actually, I did pick up the rope. I just didn't say it.
They can't see you doing that.
You're right.
You
Boom!
Yeah, see?
Here.
Yeah.
Take it.
Take
Please.
it away. So, that's what you use it for. Now, in Dreadlore, you would use a pip.
Right.
And you can have 5 pips, and that's the function of pips in Dreadlore. And you can use them to buy character traits and stuff.
Yeah.
Taking that mechanic, which is a good mechanic, putting it into D&D, I thought was cool, and it allows us to use these coins, because players love little coins.
We like shiny things.
Suddenly, they have this idea of, oh, there's this mechanic of power, and I only have so many of them, right? I can use them to do cool stuff, such as you roll to kill the Kraken. I don't know why the Kraken's on my head. On my head.
On your head.
It's on my head.
Yes.
You stab the Kraken with the Kraken-killing sword.
Gata!
Right? And you deal it a ton of damage. You've been in the fight for a while. Oops, it has 2 hit points left. I'm going to spend a narrative point. Could I roll another damage die? Or could I say that I, knock it out? Or you can do that. That's where you get into the free form of, does it make sense in the story? Does it not?
It's a bit more on the DM's,
Let's say it's
brain
Cthulhu,
plate.
right? And, for those of you that get this, Cthulhu, when he arrives, 1d4 plus 1 players dies, right? Let's say you're that last one. You didn't die when Cthulhu arrived. You take out your, dagger, and you're like, "Ah!" and you stab it. You're not going to deal any damage. Narrative point. Cthulhu has a scar. And then you die, right? Something like that. You're directing the story somehow.
Yeah.
Now, other than just having these points and being like, ha, and spending them, we wanted to promote a certain kind of gameplay, right? I want it to be on people's minds to manage their resources, to not be miserly with them, but to push for story, like cool story stuff, so that they're telling the story they want to tell, right? Here's the problem with D&D and most tabletop RPGs. This is, in my opinion, by and large, on the DM, on the storyteller. So it's not really about mechanics, it's about running the game. You take turns going around in a combat or whatever. So your players are waiting, right? And you want them to pay attention. And they do to a point. And then they're on their phones, or they're doing something, or they're doing side stuff, whatever. They're waiting for their turn. Boom, it's their turn. Boom, it's your turn. What do you do? Cthulhu just jumped out. And you didn't die.
I didn't die.
No.
I'm gonna...
You're rogue. 5, 4, 3, 2.
I'm gonna stealth
Right.
so hard.
You do. Roll your d20. Do it. Do it. You need a number that you did not get. Okay, next. That's your turn. That took 15 minutes on a good game. That probably took like 45 minutes. Your turn's over. So what do you do? Great. I don't do anything. I sneak off, but yet, okay, Cthulhu sees you and great. Right? Instead of that, you have narrative points. That idea of, I can't get a reroll because that's what inspiration is for. Right? But could I say, okay, well, Cthulhu, no, I don't really sneak, but maybe he's not looking at me because he's Cthulhu.
I'm not a threat. Yeah.
Why would he be looking at me?
Right.
He's not looking at you. So you do sneak off. Right? That kind of stuff. But how do you make sure that characters or that players are not miserly? That's the interesting thing.
And encourage group play. Yeah.
Well, these are kind of like poker chips. So I like the idea that there's a finite number of them on the table. Maybe it's 5 per person, so like 20 of them. 20, 25 of them, right? Maybe the way that you get more narrative points is, obviously the DM could give them to you, why not? But is you can get them from other players by betting. For example, my buddy Drizzle is over there, and he's playing his character Poe Papillon, and he's going to climb up a statue that is, an automaton.
Like he does.
And he's going to try to climb up it, and so that the automaton, the iron golem, does not know. And he's going to, turn it off or whatever, hit the off switch. Emyris and who?
Dav.
And Dav, our buddy Chris Williams, who's been on here before. Emyris and Dav make a little side bet as they're sitting there and they're like, maybe it's metagame, maybe it's just players, maybe it's in-game, and they're sitting there actually betting. And they're like, alright, I bet you 1 he doesn't do it. Boom. Maybe they bet against the DM. Why not? It's all encouraging. So what that's doing is you could say, well, it's taking away from Drizzle's, from Poe's moment, but it's not. What it is it's building up that moment.
And it's helping all the other players actually stay engaged and watch what Poe is doing rather than sitting there bored waiting for their turn.
Right.
They actually suddenly care about what's going to happen because they have stakes in it now.
Exactly. So you don't just let him roll. What you do is you say, all right, here's the situation. You guys are betting? Cool. What's the bet? Are they betting against me, the DM? Are they betting against Poe? What are they doing? Manage it. Lay down the wager. Now a lot is riding on Poe to throw down. Right? Boom. Maybe Emyris wins. She gets a coin. Awesome. So now you kind of have that mentality going on. It's almost like a meta mentality. The players could keep it in-game. It's all in-game. You know, why do these why do these narrative points work? Well, they're just magic coins. Give me one of those magic coins, whatever. Or maybe it's meta and it's all about players. However, now that's in people's minds. So what happens when you run out? Let's say Emyris has used all of her narrative points because she wants to drive the narrative hard, and I've got a bunch of them. And I'm sitting here like, right? Let's say she's out of heroic points. Let's say she's out of inspiration. She's eaten all of her chocolate.
I do. Yeah.
There's a situation where she's going to go try to ride the Kraken to save it.
It's like he knows me. Yeah, that's something I would attempt to do. It would be rather silly to do that with no mercy points.
Right. So, you throw down. Now, this is D&D, so you're rolling your D20. Let's say the DC is like really, really, really difficult, and you're like level 10. So it's like DC 25. You got to roll pretty high to do this, right? To ride a Kraken, I'll make it DC 30, because it's really hard.
You got to earn it. Yeah.
Okay, and have like boots of riding Krakens. So you roll, boom. Let's say you get like a 25, 26. So close. But there's nothing else you can do. No one can aid you. Do you just fail? Yes, you could just fail. But I got all these narrative points. Like I've got everybody's narrative points. What can I do as a player?
Yeah, and let's say that he has no stake in the current narrative. He doesn't have any plans on swaying the story by virtue of his character or just with where we're at in that specific part of the game. So it's not as if he actually needs the amount that he's got in his hand. So you're not...
Let's say my character's not there.
Maybe even that, yeah.
You know? He's
not even in the scene. What we were discussing... and I don't even know if we've actually made this an actual thing. We just stopped talking about it and got on here.
Yeah.
Is...
taking one for the team.
Yeah.
So, this is a completely meta mechanic. My character is not in that scene. I am going nowhere near that Kraken. So, can I aid her? No, I can't aid her. You know, with words I once told you, I would probably allow that. But let's say I can't aid her. Because my character's dead or something. Can I just, and this is what players will do, can I just give her this? No. Why? Well then, what's the point? You break the mechanic. There's a reason that you each have these things. You can have a whole pool in the middle if you want, but then you get into this antagonistic idea of players versus DM, which D&D already is wont to do.
Right.
You don't want that.
And it breaks the intensity of the scene too, because if it's just as easy as somebody giving you something, then why is it so stressful to attempt a DC 30? You know, you want the possibility of failure to still be there.
This also doesn't mean you win, by the way.
Right.
It allows you to change a little bit of the narrative. So,
right. It doesn't make the game easier. It just
makes it more interesting.
It weaves your character into it in the way that the players want to play their characters.
So, how do I give her a point, a narrative point, if I'm a player and I've got a bunch and she has none? I can just do it. There you go. You get one of these. But there's a cost to me. I've got to take one for the team. It is a negative effect. Probably on my character or on the scene as at large. Mm-hmm. So it's a give and a take. Now, I give her this point. You might say, well, wouldn't it cancel out? Well, yeah, if it was math, but this isn't math. You're playing story time.
You want the exchange to matter.
Yeah, it's got to matter. It's got to make sense. Maybe the negative effect doesn't happen now, but it will before the game ends. Or, you know.
Right.
Maybe the DMs just says, okay, just so you know, that's a thing, right? Maybe even, I don't give it to you, although I do like the handing. I give it to the DM. And you have to spend it right then.
Right.
Right? I'm going to pay for her. Boom. You give it to the DM. The DM's like, great. Right?
It's like a deal with the devil in the way.
I guess that is antagonistic. Anyway, the point is, she gets a narrative point. How do you do it? You got a 26. You needed a 30. You're trying to ride the Kraken. So you're failing, you got that narrative point. So what happens instead of you getting crushed by its huge scaly folds?
Well, I just so happen to remember that within my bag of holding, I have the boots of kraken riding.
Indeed. As you struggle to put them on, but you're hanging on with one kraken riding boot on, and then they go underwater and you hear boo, and we'll see what happens.
Right.
But it's an interesting thing out of like a Pirates of the Caribbean movie, right?
Right, and it's maintaining the intensity of the scene rather than just saying, oh, you get it, it's now easy for you. You can still fail, but it's just allowing you to prolong that intensity.
Right.
And allow you to make a couple other choices and see if that actually lends to your success.
Now, maybe you could do this, you could just do this in the game. You don't need points and stuff to do this. But this allows her to make the decision. It's not just the DM being like, all right, so this is what you do.
Right.
Right? No
it's
one,
collaborative.
Exactly. DMs, shut up.
Just play with your players, that's all.
Yeah. Let them play. Right? Like, no one really cares what your big idea is. And if they do, actually, tell me how you did that. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's pretty much it. That's the house rule we're going to implement tonight. And we'll see if it's a horrible idea.
Yeah.
It won't be. It'll be awesome.
No, yeah. I'm excited for it. We've kind of tested this rule with some Dreadlore situations and mechanics between the two of us, and it was a really fun mechanic to incorporate.
Oh, we didn't tell how would they take one for the team.
Right.
So that's the benefit of taking one for the team. Me giving her a narrative point,
Right.
which then goes directly to the DM. So what's taking one for the team then? Maybe the taking one for the team is, cool, you got one of the boots on, but the Kraken dives. Maybe that's the taking of the team. It's, yeah, you're on, but you're kind of like, or maybe you're on, but you're backwards or something, right? Like something
Right.
along those lines. It just makes the scene more interesting.
It does make it interesting, but also we've talked about it as a balancing factor within the games as
Right.
well. So let's say DM is already hard enough.
Oh.
DMing is already hard enough. That's hard to say. Anyway, and so to have a mechanic that benefits the players makes it more exciting for them, but also gives the DM a chance to level the playing field, so to speak.
Without just being like, hey,
Right,
sorry.
Without making people butt hurt. So
What you should do, just let me interject, what you should do as a DM, there's a point where you are the referee. And if something is overpowered, if it's OP, or if it's stupid, or whatever, to save the game, you have to come in and be like, hey, you can't do that.
Right.
In my humble opinion, it's best just to straight up say it. Be like, hey, listen, guys, I gotta screw you over. I've gotta railroad you in this way. You cannot do this. The door doesn't open. Sorry.
But he does explain why.
Right.
So it doesn't feel like you're being railroaded for the sake of like DM ego or something. It
Right.
is, well, the game's more important than the fact that you got something cool.
Right, look, you're actually supposed to fight the Red Dragon. I know you're charismatic as a mofi, but the fight's the Red Dragon. You're fighting
Right.
Tiamat. Sorry.
Right.
Which is not a Red Dragon, I know. Okay.
Right. So the point of all that was, now I'm completely...
It levels the playing field.
Right, it levels the playing field. So, real life example within our own campaign. We were accidentally given a staff of power that we weren't supposed to have because, it's hard to keep track of all the moving pieces, all the goals, and everything you're supposed to get done.
Oops.
Our DM thought we needed a staff of power. We actually only needed the gem. So, one of our players found the staff of power.
Let me explain really quick. They're in a game where they're finding artifacts.
Right.
And they can't use the artifacts. They pretty much know if they use the artifacts, then it's kind of like they can't resell them, or they can't give them to the person they need to sell them, or give them to.
And there's no guarantee we can use them correctly.
Right.
You know?
Like really bad stuff, they know, will happen, at
Right.
least peripherally.
And it'll draw big baddies to us, all that good stuff.
So the artifact is a gem that I had put into a Staff of Power because it made sense. But I thought I misremembered they only needed the gem,
Right.
not the entire staff. So they were like, cool, boop, we have Staff of Power. And I was like, ah! And they were like level 7. And it was the
Yeah.
Warlock that got,
Yeah. It was,
It was plus 11 to everything.
Yeah. The monsters were no longer a problem.
Right.
So, he ended up handling it. It was fine. It worked within the narrative. But it did cause him a lot of stress to figure out how to make the game fair for what we were trying to do without alienating a player.
Well, I basically did. It.
Well, you didn't alienate them because you took the time to explain why.
Right.
Right.
It was just precarious.
Right. Right.
'Cause
It's unneeded stress because it's hard enough to DM and remember all that stuff, and if
you get a goodie. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sucks.
So we thought that the narrative points would be a good way. The taking one for the team side of that mechanic would be a good way to help out the DMs and allow them to keep the playing field balanced. So, for example, with that Staff of Power that our Warlock had, say she had the narrative points. She wanted to aid somebody, give them one of her narrative points to help with whatever they were doing. Well, then that gives the DM a perfect chance to go, okay, you're taking one for the team. It damages the Staff of Power. Or whatever it does, it has the repercussions with the thing that gives you the most power.
Right.
You've taken one for the team, you've decided that, and now the game is more balanced as a result of what both the player did and the DM did.
And you can be pretty clever about it because, there's a point with DMs where you're like, I'm just waiting for them to roll a 1, right? Like, okay, go ahead, roll. I really hope they don't. I hope they don't make it, right?
Yeah.
So, what narrative points allow you to do then is do something like this. Okay, you've got that Staff of Power. Yeah, it's got the gem. As they're like, cool, I take the gem out and I just use the Staff of Power. As the DM realizes, rats.
Yeah.
Okay, but then they think, you are the DM, you are the storyteller. You say, okay, cool. First time they use the Staff of Power, you notice a crack. Go down it. Whoa, what? Yeah. You know it's you notice a crack. Goes down it. What's the deal? Why don't you roll? Why don't you try to figure it out? Boom, they take it to an artificer. They look at it, they're like, oh, that artifact is too much for the Staff of Power, right? Maybe it's you're not using it right, or you don't know how to use it, or you're not Sauron, so you can't technically
Right, you're
use
not
it well.
powerful enough to control that type of power.
If you're not careful, that Staff of Power is going to blow up. All right, well, I'm going to spend a narrative point so that crack didn't happen. Cool. Right? Because now the onus is on the player to use their points, and they get to use their points, they're using a resource, and they get the benefit of a Staff of Power. That's fair. Now, technically, it's the DM's fault. You just don't tell the players that. You could, but it plays a little better because I'm managing points. Let's say the Warlock is out of points because she's been using her Staff of Power. Emyris has a whole bunch of them, right?
So many.
It encourages her as a player to take one for the team, so you keep the Staff of Power in the group.
Right.
Right? So it's that kind of like, the DM doesn't have to be antagonistic. It kind of has this, hey, this is a dangerous thing, but you want it.
Right.
Right?
How much are you willing to sacrifice to keep
Right.
that in the game, knowing that it is a flawed weapon and...
Super awesome, super powerful,
Yeah.
but at the expense of your narrative points.
Right.
And if you spend too many,
then you can't do anything else with
then that's it. And that's up to the players.
Right.
Right?
So it's a way of kind of managing, player resources and the really overpowered things they might accidentally receive in a way that doesn't make them feel as if the DM is
Bullying them or
bullying
something.
them. Yeah.
All right, so we will let you know in our next live stream about how it went. The players
Yeah.
might be like, who knows?
We'll
Until
find out.
then, I will post in the chat right quick. One, go to dreadlore.com. That will be the, website.
Yeah.
And two, let me pop over here.
Share the Kickstarter.
I'll share the Kickstarter.
Also, we've got some cool topics planned for the next couple live streams. One of them being candle safety, due to real life experiences with playing D&D with candles.
Yeah, we'll get there.
We'll get there.
Until then, tip your DM.